Okay, we're looking at the Unit 2 Lessons 5 through 7 practice quiz answer key today. The first few questions, I'll have the directions of simplify the expression. So if you look at question 1, you have a fraction where you have a binomial in the numerator and a binomial in the denominator. And in order to simplify this, what you're going to need to do is find the greatest common factor of the numerator and of the denominator, which means you need to factor out what they have in common. So the numerator each term has a 5y in common, and the denominator also each term has a 5y in common. So when you take those out, you're left with 5y times 2y plus 3 in the numerator, and 5y times 7y minus 1 in the denominator. And once you have the 5y's factored out, you can cancel them out, and you're left with just the 2y plus 3 over 7y minus 1 as your fully simplified answer. For question 2, we have a monomial. There's no plus or minus signs in between these terms, divided by a monomial times another fraction with a monomial over a monomial. Monomial meaning one term, if you don't remember that. So in order to multiply these two fractions together, you can look at the terms and see if there's anything that cancels right away. So I looked at 2 over 14 reduces to 1 over 7, and 25 over 15. You can divide each of those by 5, and if you do, you're left with 5 over 3. 1 times 5 gives me the 5, keeping in mind that negative sign out in front. And 3 times 7 gives me this 21. And then I just wrote all the variables that were over here in this step. And once I had them like that, they're all in alphabetical order. So you can see u to the third over u to the second just reduces to u to the first power. X to the third over x to the first reduces to x to the second. Y over y to the second reduces to 1 over y. That's why the y is in the denominator. That's where the bigger power is. And then there's a z-fifth that's also in the denominator. For the third question, we have a monomial over a monomial to the third power divided by a fraction where each thing is a monomial. So you can see that the first thing I did was I did each term inside here to the third power. That's how I got 8x cubed y cubed over w to the sixth power. And then because we have division, we need to flip the second fraction over, take the reciprocal of it, and turn the division into a multiplication sign. This is a dot here, if you can't tell. And then once you have it like this, it's basically the same as problem 2. 8 over 24 reduces to 1/3, so there's a 3 in the denominator. X cubed over x squared, it's just x in the numerator. Y cubed, that's the only y, so it stays there. W to the fifth over w to the sixth is 1 over w, so there's a w in the denominator. Question 4, we have a binomial divided by a trinomial divided by a binomial over a binomial. And this time, each of these things has something that you can factor out. The first thing I did was I factored 9 minus a squared. This is a difference of squares. It's 3 plus a times 3 minus a. This trinomial factors into a plus 3 times a plus 2. AC is 6, and 3 times 2 gives you 6, and 3 plus 2 gives you 5. That's how I got these two things. 2a minus 6 has a factor of 2 in common. If you take that out, you're left with 2 times a minus 3. Notice that I have flipped over this second fraction because of a division sign. Over here it's flipped over and now it's multiplication. So while this was in the numerator, now it's in the denominator. This denominator becomes the numerator, and it has a factor of 5 for each of these, so I took 5 out and I was left with a plus 2. Once I have everything in factored form, then I can look and see for things that cancel. There's an a plus 2 that cancels, there's an a plus 3 that cancels, and then 3 minus a and a minus 3 are the same thing, but because they're a difference and they're flipped, the order is flipped, when they cancel, they become negative 1. So I'm left with just negative 1 times 5 over 2 is negative 5 halves. Question 5 is our first word problem, and it says a right triangle with an area of x squared minus 4 square units has a leg that measures 2x plus 4 units. Determine the length of the other leg of the triangle. So because this problem is talking about area of a triangle, I started off with a triangle area formula, which is 1/2 base times height. I plugged in the area they gave me, which was x squared minus 4, and I plugged in one of the sides, which is 2x plus 4. I just called it the base, so I'm solving for the height. And I also have the half out here. So I did half of 2x plus 4. Half of 2 is just 1x, and half of 4 is 2. So I changed this to x plus 2. And then to get h by itself, you have to divide both sides by x plus 2, and you're left with this expression. And x squared minus 4 is a difference of squares, and it factors into x plus 2 times x minus 2. The x plus 2's cancel, and you're left with x minus 2. Because it's a word problem, I want a sentence as an answer. You need to say the other leg is x minus 2 units. Question 6, we're simplifying again. This time we have the addition of two fractions, so we're going to need to get a common denominator. The first thing I did is I factored x squared minus 16 into x plus 4 times x minus 4. And so I see this other fraction already has the x plus 4, so it's just missing x minus 4. So when I wrote the second fraction over here, I multiplied by x minus 4 in the top and the bottom. Now they have the same denominator. 2 times x minus 4 is 2x minus 8. When you simplify the numerator, you get 2x plus 8. And you can factor 2 out of that and be left with x plus 4. And then the x plus 4's cancel. And you're left with 2 over x minus 4 as your final answer. Question 7, similar process to number 6, except this time you're subtracting. I need to factor my denominators first. This first fraction has a denominator that factors into 2 times x minus 6. And the second fraction factors into x minus 6 times x plus 2. You can see that each one has x minus 6, so that's good. But this has x plus 2, so this one needs an x plus 2. And this has a 2, so this one needs a 2. So my common denominator is going to be 2x plus 2, x minus 6. For my numerators, this needs the x plus 2, so I did 5 times x plus 2, minus this thing needs the 2, so 20 times 2. That's how I got all this stuff here. Then I just simplified out the numerator, and I got 5x minus 30, and I factored the 5 out of each term. I was left with x minus 6, so my x minus 6's cancel, and my final answer is 5 over 2 times x plus 2. Question 8 is another word problem. It says the expressions 5x over 2, 20 over x plus 4, and 10 over x minus 4 represent the lengths of the sides of a triangle. Write a simplified expression for the perimeter of the triangle. So the perimeter is the sum of each of the three sides, so I have to sum up the three sides. You can see I did that here. My common denominator is just none of these things don't have anything in common. So the common denominator is just going to be 2 times x plus 4 times x minus 4. And this first fraction, 5x, is missing the x plus 4 and the x minus 4, so that's why they're multiplied together times the 5x. Plus the 20 is missing the 2 and the x minus 4. Plus the 10 is missing the 2 and the x plus 4. So you're going to need to multiply all these things out. When I multiplied out this first term, I was left with 5x cubed minus 80x. Plus 40x. Oh no, I was just left with 5x cubed minus 80x. When I multiply out the second term, I get 40x minus 160. And when I multiply out this third term, I get 20x plus 80. When you combine all your like terms, you should be left with 5x cubed minus 20x minus 80. And that's over the denominator. And that answer is here, except I noticed that each of these terms I could factor 5 out of. So I did that, and I was left with 5 times x cubed minus 4x minus 20. Over to the back of the quiz. Question 9, you have to identify asymptotes and domain and range of the function. The graph is here. So the first thing I did is I wrote down a, h, and k. A is the numerator, it's 1. H is whatever makes the denominator equal 0, which is negative 1. And k is the number over here. The h tells us the vertical asymptote, which is x equals negative 1. K tells us the horizontal asymptote, which is y equals 3. The domain is all the x values such that x cannot equal negative 1, and the range is all the y values such that y cannot equal 3. Question 10, graph the function, state the domain and range. Again, you're going to want to write A, H, and K first. I know this is a little messy right here, but this is my H. A is the numerator, H is 2, K is 4. If H is 2, that means I have a vertical asymptote at 2. So I came over to 2, and I drew a vertical asymptote. K is 4, so I have a horizontal asymptote at 4. I went up 4, drew a horizontal line. Because A is positive, you're going to want to be in the first quadrant and the third quadrant. So I sketched my graph there, and my domain and range are x cannot equal 2 and y cannot equal 4. And that's the whole practice.